The winter sun hung low over the narrow, crowded lanes of the city, its pale light struggling through a haze of dust and exhaust. On a worn-out wooden bench near a half-closed bakery sat a woman with 2 children curled beside her. Their faces were smudged with soot, their eyes half-lidded from exhaustion. She pulled a torn shawl tighter around them as if that single layer could block the cold wind sneaking through every gap. Her name was Mara, and the day had already stretched too long without mercy. They hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. The younger child, a boy of 6, kept asking for bread in a voice barely louder than a whisper. The older one, a girl of 9, tried to keep brave, pretending she wasn't hungry, but her stomach betrayed her with quiet growls. Mara's own lips were cracked, her eyes rimmed red not from tears, but from holding them back. When the boy asked again, she bent low, brushed her trembling fingers across his cheek, and said softly, "We'll eat tomorrow, my love. Tomorrow will be better." It wasn't a lie meant to deceive, it was a promise she prayed life would let her keep. But life had not been kind to Mara. Once she had worked at a textile mill, her hands quick and skilled, her days filled with the chatter of coworkers and the rhythm of the machines. Then, the factory closed. The owner vanished without paying the last 3 months' wages. Her husband, already frail from illness, passed away weeks later, leaving her with nothing but 2 children and the fading memory of better days. She searched every corner of the city for work, washing clothes, cleaning homes, even begging for small jobs at construction sites, but the world didn't have room for a widow with children clinging to her legs. That evening, as the wind grew colder and the sky turned a dim orange, she tried to find a safe spot near a closed shop front. She had just wrapped the shawl tighter when a voice came from behind. "Are you all right, miss?" It was a man's voice, gentle, uncertain, but kind. She turned to see a tall figure in a faded gray jacket and a woolen cap. His name, though she didn't know it yet, was Elias. His eyes carried something rare, not pity, but concern that came from a place of quiet understanding. Before continuing, dear viewers, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Stories of Kindness. Your small act helps us share more stories that remind the world that goodness still exists. Mara hesitated, clutching her children closer. "We're fine," she murmured, avoiding his gaze. Elias didn't move closer, he just nodded and said, "The bakery owner across the street gives away unsold bread after closing. You should ask." Her pride burned at the thought. She had never begged before. "Thank you," she said quietly, but didn't move. Elias lingered for a moment, then walked away toward a narrow lane lit by a single flickering bulb. She thought he was gone. But 10 minutes later, he returned, with a brown paper bag in his hands. The smell hit them first: warm bread and lentil soup, steam still rising in the cold air. He knelt before the children and said softly, "Here. Eat today." Mara stared at the food as if it were a dream she didn't trust. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She wanted to refuse, to protect the last shred of dignity left in her. But her children's eyes widened with hunger and hope. She finally whispered, "Why would you do this?" Elias smiled faintly. "Because someone once did the same for me." He didn't explain more, and she didn't ask. The children began to eat, quietly, gratefully. Mara watched them, her eyes glistening, her heart breaking and healing all at once. She whispered a thank you that the wind carried away. Over the next few days, Elias kept returning, sometimes with food, sometimes just to check on them. He never asked questions or demanded thanks. He told her where she might find work, introduced her to a woman who needed help sewing clothes at home, and helped her rent a single room in an old building. Mara didn't know how to repay him. Every night, as she tucked her children in, she thought of how a stranger's kindness had begun to rebuild the ruins of her life. But Elias had his own story. Years ago, he too had sat in the cold, hungry, beside his dying mother. She had told him the same words, "We'll eat tomorrow." But she never woke up the next day. He grew up in orphanages, wandering between jobs, learning how cruel the world could be to those who had nothing. But one winter, a baker had found him behind a dumpster, fed him, and given him a chance. From that moment, Elias swore that no one near him would go hungry if he could help it. Now, helping Mara's family felt like redemption, not for sins he'd committed, but for the pain he could never erase. As weeks turned into months, Mara began to change. Her cheeks regained color, her children smiled more often, and laughter began to echo in their small room. She started sewing for neighbors and soon, for a local tailor who admired her work. Life, once cruel and gray, began to bloom with quiet color. Elias still visited, but less often. He wanted her to stand on her own, not rely on him. One afternoon, when she received her first full payment from the tailor, Mara ran through the streets until she found him repairing a broken bicycle near a workshop. She held out a small lunchbox and said, "Your turn. Eat today." He looked at her, stunned, then opened it to find warm rice and stew, the same meal he had given her that first night. They both laughed softly, the kind of laughter that heals the ache of old wounds. Months later, spring returned. The city's narrow streets smelled of rain and blooming trees. Mara's children were back in school, their uniforms still patched but clean. She had saved enough to rent a better place. One day, she visited Elias at the bakery he now managed. The shelves were lined with golden loaves, and his hands were dusted with flour. He looked up and smiled. "You look happy." "I am," she said. "You helped us believe that tomorrow was worth waiting for." Elias chuckled softly. "You did the rest yourself." They stood in silence for a while, the kind that feels full rather than empty. Then, from outside, came the sound of a woman crying, someone sitting on the curb with a child, much like Mara had once been. Without a word, Elias packed 2 loaves and walked out. Mara followed. The woman tried to hide her face, whispering that they'd eat tomorrow. Elias knelt, placing the bread before her, and said the words that had once changed everything, "Eat today." Mara watched, tears brimming in her eyes, realizing how the smallest act of kindness could ripple through time, touching lives far beyond its origin. That night, as she lay beside her sleeping children, she looked at their peaceful faces and whispered, "Kindness is a circle, it always comes back." And somewhere down another street, someone else's tomorrow began to shine. Dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, please don't scroll away. Like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Stories of Kindness so we can keep spreading light in a world that often forgets how powerful kindness can be.